This is the second of our videos looking at the importance of family in A Christmas Carol. This time we're focusing in on the evidence, but more specifically the writer's methods. Can you identify from the quotations that are key to the theme of the importance of family what exactly the writer is doing? Can you identify the techniques used? Can you shape what you say about the examples to answer the question as effectively as you can? It's really important to bear in mind the assessment objectives again. So we've looked in the first video at assessment objective 1, what the big ideas are and what the evidence is what we're moving on to now. That's a part of assessment objective 1, but we're specifically focusing on assessment objective 2 here. So how does the evidence that you've identified support the points that you are making? So it's all about looking at the language, identifying the key words, looking for layers of meaning, drilling down and demonstrating that you understand exactly the methods used by Dickens to make his points effectively through the use of language and through the different techniques that he adopts. This is a quick reminder of what our three big ideas are to do with family, because any of the analysis that you do has to link back to assessment objective 1, what the big ideas are. So as we work our way through, I'm going to ask you to be looking at a series of examples from each stave and to think about which of these big ideas, the examples that we've isolated, actually refer to. Because when you talk about the techniques that are used, you have to link them back to points that answer the question. So we've got the idea of the Christmas message, that a strong family is a Christian family. That's absolutely clear in the events in the novel, particularly with the Cratchits, but not just the Cratchits. We've got the idea of love being at the heart of the family. And a part of that is redemption as well, particularly if you think about Scrooge and his family, the way Fred always allows Scrooge the opportunity to come back. And finally, absolutely central to the novella is Dickens' wish for something to be done about poverty, and that is also a kind of family, that humanity is a family, the Christian family as well, thinking about your fellow man, doing something to help them. So as you work your way through these examples, you need to bear in mind those themes very, very clearly and link them back if you can. They will actually also give you clues as to the kind of things that you can say about these examples. So this is the method I would like you to take. We're going to deal with it section by section. So we're looking first of all at some examples from stave 1 and stave 2. What I would like you to do is to pause the video. You are taking each example in turn. You are deciding how it links to the big ideas, but also you're identifying the techniques that are used and the key words, the words that you will say a lot about, the words that you will explore in detail to link to whatever the question is that you are asked. So pause the video now, give yourself a good 10 minutes to look at the examples, see what you can come up with. Don't just let the video run on and see what I've identified. Have a go yourself. It's the only way you will know if you're on the right lines. Okay, so hopefully by now you've looked at the examples from stave 1. So the first one might not seem to be about family. It's a simile that is used to describe Scrooge, as solitary as an oyster. It's a really useful quotation to remember because it can be used for so many different questions that might crop up in the exam. Immediately, obviously, the technique is simile, but what has it got to do with family? Well, it's kind of the opposite of family, because Scrooge does have a family. We know that because we know that Fred is still alive and in his life because he's introduced in stave 1. Yet despite that, Scrooge chooses to isolate himself. So the image is an interesting one because an oyster is something that has a very hard exterior. but equally it has the potential to open up and reveal a pearl. So all that is a part of the kind of analysis that you might make of this particular example. Now, the second example there, men and women seem by one consent to open their shut-up hearts freely and to think of people below them as if they really were fellow passengers to the grave. These are the words of Fred that he says to Scrooge in a very passionate way because he believes very strongly in the importance of Christmas. So this obviously at its heart is about the central message of the importance of celebrating Christmas and looking after each other, which is what the whole novella is really about. Dickens wanted to change the world that he was in. So it is a metaphor, especially this phrase, fellow passengers to the grave. The idea of Christmas being about equality and linking to the message about assisting the poor. Quite a few examples from Stave 2. Do bear in mind as we work our way through this, you won't be able to remember everything, so do focus in on the examples that you think you can remember and that you think will enable you to show your understanding the absolute best that you can. Back to the quotations though. So the first one, again, it's similar to the idea of solitary as an oyster, because we've got the repetition of the word solitary. We were told Scrooge the adult is solitary as an oyster, but Scrooge the child also was, and again that makes him lonely, that makes him isolated. So it's the use of emotive language, I think, that's important here. The idea of him being solitary and neglected, those words particularly make you feel sorry for the child, and in fact Scrooge sheds a tear for himself really. And it also kind of links to this idea of the reason he's cut off from his family is because that's something that happened to him in his youth, that possibly the reason he is the way he is as an adult is because of that experience he had as a child. The second example is linked to Scrooge as the solitary child. It's when Fan comes to rescue Scrooge, if you like. She actually says to him, "Father is so much kinder than he used to be, that home's like heaven." So it's interesting, that choice of simile there, because it does link Christianity with the idea of a happy family, which is the thing that ends Scrooge's isolation. So you can link that example to the theme of the promotion of Christian ideas and that family is closely linked to being a good Christian. Now, the third example there doesn't immediately spring to mind that it's got anything to do with family, but these are the words that Belle speaks to Scrooge when she breaks off their engagement. So this was the one time in Scrooge's life where he had the prospect of becoming part of the family, and what he did was pursue wealth instead. So when she talks about it, uses this metaphor of an idol, a golden idol, she's talking about Scrooge's pursuit of money. So what Dickens is suggesting there is that that greed that caused Scrooge to pursue money is something that's the opposite of what being a good family person is, because it is the thing that stops Scrooge from becoming a husband and potentially a father. And he's obviously pointing the finger there at people who don't care about family, and he equates that with those greedy people who pursue wealth at all costs. That is the second quotation there, is obviously the similar theme. She releases him, but because I think the important thing with this quotation is it shows how for Belle, love is above wealth, and she refuses to marry someone who she doesn't love. And when she does break off the marriage, she uses emotive language to describe that. We've got the phrase full heart, and we've got the reference to love there. And I think what Dickens is saying here is that money shouldn't be a part of what you're talking about if you're talking about family, and here particularly romantic implications of it, because this again is Scrooge's opportunity to be in a happy family, and he basically lets it go for greed. Okay, as we said before, Stave 3, it's huge. There's lots and lots of examples in stage 3 of references to family. So on the screen there, you can see a number of them. There are 6. If you don't want to do all of them, don't, but focus in on the ones that you think you can remember and that you can say lots about. So give yourself a good 10 minutes and let's see what you can come up with. So pause the video and we'll see in a few minutes when you've had a go whether you've agreed with me. Okay, so I've grouped the first 2 together because they touch on Christian imagery, and we've already said it's one of the big ideas, the idea of family being closely linked to Christianity. So the first quote there is the reference to people leaving church and chapel on Christmas morning. We've also got the reference to Bob being blessed. So the Ghost of Christmas Present blesses the house. And in fact, there is a third quotation there too with Tiny Tim saying, God blesses everyone. So clearly, these examples we've got of the Cratchits, in particular Bob and Tiny Tim, are of good Christians who are very, very closely linked to God. And that fits in with our idea of good Christian family being the strongest kind of family that you can have. Linked to that, but a separate point really, is to do with the way the Cratchits' faith makes them see everything that they get as a blessing. So even though they don't have much, what they do have they appreciate. So when they're talking about the meal, even though it's obvious to the reader the meal is a small thing, no Cratchit would ever say that. So we've got this reference to emotive language there with the word blushed, because they would see it as a sign of ingratitude, that actually you shouldn't ever criticise something. You should be pleased with what you've got and grateful for what you've got. We've also got the juxtaposition there of small and large, because it is a relatively large family, and the meal in comparison is obviously small. So that's the technique that's being used there. And then we have 3 further examples from stage 3. As I said, you don't need to remember them all, and you can just remember some fragments. These are other examples of families who are spending Christmas Day together, and there's hints in these descriptions of them being Christian families. So the first one there, we've got the reference to the glowing fire, and it's lots of generations of the same family. An old man and woman, their children and their children's children, and another generation. It seems almost impossible, but around the glowing fire is the key bit. So if you can remember that bit, it represents the warmth of God, because it's a symbol. In the Bible, in the Old Testament, God appears to Moses as a burning bush when he gives him the 10 Commandments. So you can link it with that. And throughout the novella, fire is used as a theme of Christianity. It's a theme of comfort. If you think back to Stave 1, Bob tries to warm himself with very little heat because he can't get at the coal, because Scrooge locks the coal away. And that same idea of fire representing comfort and warmth, and also Christianity, goes right through the novella, so there's lots of references to it. The second example is linked to family, because these are Fred's words about Scrooge. His uncle, despite the fact that he rejects him quite rudely every year, he will continue to keep giving the chances to come back into the family and join him for a family Christmas. And that's the whole notion of redemption. And it's also love. It's the fact that even though he treats him that way and he is rude, that Fred will never give up on him. And that's what a good Christian should do. And again, that links to our big ideas. Final example, we've got the boy and the girl, ignorance and want, and I don't think it's something that you should miss out if you're discussing family, because it literally is a boy and a girl. They're children. Obviously, children are a part of a family, but these are the opposite, if you like, of the experience that the Cratchits share, because the Cratchits have their Christian faith to keep them from being like the boy and the girl. Even though the boy and the girl are symbols, they're not actually a boy and a girl. They do represent what can happen to people who fall into the poverty trap if they don't have that strength that Christianity brings for them. And last but not least, we have some quotations from staves 4 and 5. Repeat the process. Don't let the video run on. Pause the screen, write the quotations down. What can you find? What techniques are used? What keywords would you zoom in on? How do they link to the big ideas that we've been discussing? Stave 4. So this is a stave I think that is the bleakest, because this is Scrooge seeing his future. And I think the central thing is about, if you don't have a close family, what can you possibly expect after death? And the first example there is the laundress talking about why she's stolen the things from Scrooge. And one of the things she says is, if he had actually been a better person than he was, he would have had family around him. She doesn't use the word family, but that's what she means. She wouldn't have been able to steal the things from him. So it just goes to show it's the bleak side of it. If you isolate yourself and you die alone and you don't have family there, this is the future that you face, and it's very, very bleak. And there is some emotive language there with a reference to look after him, because all the laundress is doing is looking after herself. So there's a message there that I think really the people like the laundress represent that side of society suggested by ignorance and want. They're the people who take. So this is a flip side. If you don't have that loving family, if you don't care for people, this is what you'll end up with. In contrast to that, in the same stave, we have the Cratchits following Tiny Tim's death, and the love that they have for each other is huge. And it's we've got the emotive language, but also the repetition of the word kissed, and how that shows the strength of their love for one another. And then the Tiny Tim is described as the childish essence, which is from God. So again, that linking Tiny Tim with God is really important. Tiny Tim, all the way through, every time he is mentioned, he's an example of a good Christian, but also he's closely linked to Jesus. And he actually makes a point earlier in the novella about being glad that people can see that he's a cripple, because it will remind them of Jesus, of the man who died to save our sins. So that's a really important part of the novella, and again it links to one of our big ideas to do with family, a good Christian family. Stave 5 is the happy ending, and this is where we see Scrooge embracing the idea of being a part of a family. Interesting description of Scrooge laughing there. It says it was a splendid laugh, a most illustrious laugh. But this is the reason I've coloured it in blue. The father of a long, long line of brilliant laughs. It's interesting the word father is used. Obviously, that links to God, God the Father, but also it links to the notion of family, and it's something positive. So he embraces Christianity and he changes for the good. And again, the language used links to ideas of family. And the final two also do that. When he talks to Bob Cratchit, we have this assurance that he'll raise Bob's salary, but also that he'll try to assist his struggling family. And in the end, Scrooge actually becomes a part of that family too, because we're told to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. So again, the use of the word father there, representing the change in values that Scrooge represents.